The certified letter landed on my doorstep like a bomb wrapped in legal paper. Notice of intent to foreclose was printed across the top in bold letters that seemed to scream at me. I stood there in my slippers, coffee mug in hand, staring at the envelope while across the street Sandra Withers, our HOA president, posed for photos in front of the half-demolished clubhouse. She was holding a giant novelty check made out to Vibes and Granite Incorporated. The mailman gave me a sympathetic look and whispered, "Sir, did you really refuse to pay the assessment?" I looked down at the letter, then back at Sandra's photo opportunity. "I refuse to pay for a granite waterfall," I said quietly. "And apparently my penalty is losing my home. My name is Caleb Drummond, and I'm what you'd call a quiet homeowner in Birch Ridge at Fox Hollow, a neighborhood where lawn heights are monitored like nuclear codes and mailbox colors require committee approval. I work from home as a software consultant, I collect vintage radios, and I grill burgers every Thursday night. I pay my bills on time, I keep my grass at exactly 2.5 inches, and I've never once violated our covenant restrictions. My life was perfectly ordinary until Sandra Withers decided our modest clubhouse needed to become a luxury spa retreat. Sandra is a woman with helmet-like bangs, a personality that reminds you of a parking ticket, and a clipboard so thick it creates its own weather system. She believes our simple clubhouse, which was built to host book clubs and the occasional potluck, should be transformed into what she calls a multi-sensory healing retreat complete with a eucalyptus steam cave and a crystal chandelier visible from space. The HOA board, which consists of Sandra, her sister, and her sister's husband, passed a special assessment that cost as much as 2 mortgage payments. When the vote came up at the annual meeting, I was the only person who voted no. I also made sure to pay my regular HOA dues on time, every single month, just like I always had. Sandra's response was to discover foreclosure as a new hobby, apparently deciding that my refusal to fund her granite dreams made me public enemy number 1 in Birch Ridge. The letters started multiplying like rabbits. First came the delinquency reminder, even though I wasn't delinquent on anything. Then came the mandatory contribution to community vision notice, written like I owed religious tithes to a deity named Traverton. One morning I woke up to find a red tag taped to my garage door that read OWN compliant, obstructing community progress. Sandra began doing drive-bys with a laser measuring device, citing me for what she called mailbox swagger and fence lines that diminish neighborhood cohesion. A rumor started circulating that I had somehow sabotaged the clubhouse renovation by poisoning the rebar with dissent, whatever that meant. She sent an email barring me from using the community pool until I paid my share, putting air quotes around share like it was a suspicious concept. She also started emailing contractors and vendors, implying that I had authorized them to place liens on my property. Meanwhile, the demolition crews arrived at the clubhouse like an invading army. Perfectly good walls came down, a functional kitchen was demolished, and Sandra filmed herself wearing a hard hat, giving dramatic monologues about healing stones and positive energy flow. I submitted a formal request for the contractor bids and meeting minutes. Sandra replied that those documents were for board eyes only. I asked who the HOA treasurer was. She smiled like a cat who discovered online banking and said, "Also me." That's when I knew something was very wrong. Everything changed the morning Sandra shoved a final notice under my front door at 6 a.m. The letter claimed she had legal authority to foreclose on my home within 30 days for assessment delinquency. She had carbon copied a law firm whose email signature contained more American eagles than a wildlife sanctuary. But when I sat down and actually read through the numbers, nothing added up. The assessment line item included charges for luxury spa towels, streaming music subscriptions for the Clubhouse Ambience playlist, and a $17,000 expense labeled Vision Consulting, Withers Group LLC. That last one made my blood run cold. I'm a quiet guy, but I'm not stupid. I spent the next week digging through every document I could find. I pulled up the recorded covenants from the county website, I read through our state's Planned Community Act, and I printed out every newsletter and financial statement from the past 3 years. Then I drafted certified letters requesting a formal audit, proof that the membership had actually voted on the assessment, and a copy of the HOA's fidelity bond. I filed a formal complaint with the state's HOA Oversight Unit, carbon copied the county recorder's office, and hand-delivered information packets to 3 of my neighbors. One of those neighbors was Lydia Cho, who happens to be a municipal attorney. Another was Gus Alvar, a retired bank compliance officer who treats spreadsheets like crime scenes and has a nose for financial irregularities. Within 1 week, Gus traced checks from our HOA dues account to something called a temporary operations account that just happened to share the same address as Sandra's Etsy business. Lydia pointed out that our bylaws required a 2/3 vote of the entire membership for any special assessment exceeding 10% of the annual budget. Sandra had passed her assessment with a Facebook poll that had comments disabled and only 14 people responding. I also installed a small security camera on my property that happened to have a clear view of the clubhouse dumpster. It captured Sandra instructing the demolition team to lose several boxes of old financial records because, in her words, paperwork just clutters the vibe. I decided it was time to stop being quiet. I set up a folding table on my front lawn, brought out my laptop and a projector, and put up a sign that said document viewing, free admission. I even made popcorn and put it in a bowl labeled foreclosure popcorn. Neighbors started arriving, curious about what was happening. They sipped lemonade while I showed them receipts, bank statements, and the security camera video of Sandra personally directing boxes of HOA records into a contractor's truck like she was orchestrating a cover-up. Lydia Cho stood up and explained, between bites of popcorn, that foreclosing on a homeowner for an invalid assessment constitutes abusive debt collection. She added that threatening foreclosure through the mail while simultaneously cooking the books could potentially qualify as mail fraud. I compiled everything into a detailed report and sent it to the state HOA Oversight Office, the County Sheriff's Financial Crimes Unit, and our HOA's insurance company. I made sure to attach the specific clause in our policy about coverage exclusions for dishonest acts by officers. The insurance company responded faster than I expected, freezing the HOA's checking account pending their investigation. 2 days later, Detective Raphael Baines from the Sheriff's Financial Crimes Unit called my cell phone. He asked if the HOA board had officially approved payments to something called Withers Group. When I told him the board was essentially Sandra, Sandra's sister, and Sandra's brother-in-law, he went quiet for a moment. Then he asked if I could meet him at the clubhouse the next morning. The clubhouse that was now just a gutted shell echoing with Sandra's expensive mistakes. The special meeting drew what felt like half the neighborhood. People were standing in the parking lot because the clubhouse interior was just exposed beams and construction debris. Sandra arrived wearing her hard hat and a blazer the color of victory, clearly expecting to intimidate everyone into submission one more time. Instead, Detective Baines stood up and began reading from an official-looking document. 2 other officers started boxing up laptops and binders while contractors watched in slow-motion horror. The insurance company representative asked Sandra to produce the HOA's fidelity bond. Sandra handed her a brochure for scented candles, apparently confused about what a fidelity bond actually was. Then Lydia Cho stood up and played the security footage on her laptop for everyone to see. The video showed Sandra clearly instructing workers to dispose of financial records. Gus Alvar pulled up his flowchart on a poster board, showing in painful detail how money flowed from the Birch Ridge HOA account to Withers Group LLC, then to a luxury day spa and a website selling something called chandeliers premium chandeliers. The crowd made a collective sound like air being let out of a balloon, a mixture of shock and anger rippling through the parking lot. Detective Baines turned to Sandra with an expression of professional disappointment. "Ma'am," he said in a calm voice, "you used threats of foreclosure to collect funds for a non-approved assessment. You transferred HOA funds into a company that you personally control, and you destroyed official records." He pulled out handcuffs and clicked them onto Sandra's wrists with the polite efficiency of someone who'd done this many times before. She sputtered something about vision alignment and community betterment. Someone in the back of the crowd yelled, "Align yourself with that squad car." The detective carefully bagged the giant novelty check as evidence. He also took my foreclosure notice, labeled it false instrument, and sealed it in an evidence bag like he was disposing of a dangerous snake. Sandra Withers was formally charged with theft, fraud, and abuse of fiduciary duty. After a plea agreement, she was sentenced to 18 months of probation, ordered to pay $63,000 in restitution to the HOA, and permanently banned from serving on any homeowner association board in the state. The judge also assigned her 200 hours of community service, specifically cleaning and organizing public records storage. When the sentence was read, Sandra's face went from red to white to a shade of purple I didn't know existed. She opened her mouth to argue, but her lawyer put a hand on her shoulder and whispered something that made her close it again. As they led her out of the courtroom, she looked back at me one final time with an expression of pure disbelief, as if she couldn't understand how her perfect plan had unraveled so completely.